This is the Global News Podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Emilio Sampedro, and in the early hours of Friday, the 7th of December, these are our main stories. Global stock markets have fallen over worries the arrest of a Chinese tech executive may fuel the US-China trade war. And the Rwandan opposition activist Diane Rwigara has been acquitted of charges of insurrection and forgery. Also in this podcast, Yemen peace talks in a Swedish castle get off to a slow but hopeful start. And which films have been nominated for this year's Golden Globe Awards?
The vice presidency is a mostly symbolic job. However, if we came to a understanding.
That's all coming up. But in our last podcast, we brought you news of the arrest in Canada of a top executive from the Chinese technology company Huawei. Meng Wanzhou, the company's chief financial officer and daughter of its founder, was detained at the request of the U.S., who have accused the telecoms giant of violating sanctions against Iran. The move has sparked anger in China. Now Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has weighed into the debate, insisting his government had no involvement in the arrest. Ms. Guangzhou's detention caused stock markets in the U.S. and Europe to fall sharply, reviving worries over America's trade war with China. So how has this latest development affected relations between the two countries? A question for our New York business correspondent, Michelle Fleury.
The concern is that you're at this point where a truce has just been negotiated, where the US will hold off on imposing tariffs on Chinese goods for 90 days to allow time for trade talks between these two economic giants to continue. There were already doubts beginning to enter. Certainly, if you look at investors and the markets earlier this week, news of this truce was greeted very positively. Then doubts began to creep in, and this has only further increased the skepticism that was already growing. The reason for that skepticism is that they fear that it could materially damage the relationship between the US and China at this critical time, because it's not just the arrest of an executive from a Chinese company. She's also the daughter of the CEO, who was himself a member of the People's Liberation Army. This is an important company in China. People have been comparing it to the likes of Apple in America. And so it gives you a sense of the stakes involved here.
Yeah, and relations seemed, anyway, over the weekend to have been getting better after that dinner between President Xi and President Trump in Buenos Aires. Then it's all sort of gotten very complicated again.
Yes, that's right. I mean, earlier today we heard from the White House and US President Donald Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, said in a press briefing a short while ago that actually he knew in advance about the arrest of a top executive.
I knew in advance, but this is something that we get from the Justice Department, and these kinds of things happen with some frequency. We certainly don't inform the president on every one of them.
As a result of that, people are going to start wondering, well, hang on a second, was the US negotiating in good faith? No doubt we're going to hear more reaction out of China, likely to provoke a lot of anger.
Michelle Fleury in New York. Next to Rwanda. Supporters of the opposition leader Diane Rwigara cheering after she was acquitted by the High Court on Thursday. She was arrested in 2017 after her bid to run in Rwanda's presidential election was denied on allegations that she'd forged signatures of supporters. She was also charged with inciting insurrection for criticizing President Paul Kagame, whose government has been accused of becoming increasingly intolerant of dissent. Ms. Rwigara was facing more than 20 years in prison, but now all the charges against her and her mother and 4 co-accused have been dropped. She gave her reaction to the BBC's Julian Marshall.
The court system in Rwanda is very unpredictable, so I didn't know what to expect. So yes, I was surprised.
Because the judges said that you and your mother didn't have a case to answer over the forgery under the Rwandan constitution guaranteed free speech. And yet you've always said that the charges against you were politically motivated.
Yes, they were politically motivated. The only reason I was sent to prison is because I tried to run for presidency, and I founded a movement, and I criticized the government and challenged its policies. I'm happy that I was found innocent because I'm innocent. I was innocent anyway.
What I was trying to get from you was this idea that politically motivated charges, in your view, have been dismissed by a court in Rwanda. Does that mean Rwanda has an independent judiciary, or was the court, in your view, directed to deliver that verdict?
I do not think that the Rwandan court system is independent. I do not. That's all I'm going to say.
You're not going to say the other bit, which is the likelihood is that the court was told to acquit you from higher up. And if that is the case, the question is why?
I think you should ask that question the person who gave that order. I don't know why he gave that order, but I'm happy he did.
And by he, you're referring to the president himself, are you?
Yes, I'm referring to President Kagame.
Has he been under a lot of pressure, as far as you know, to acquit you and your mother?
There has been people speaking up about our case. And yes, I do believe that that kind of advocacy influenced today's court decision.
Rwandan opposition leader Diane Rwigara speaking there to Julian Marshall. Peace talks are continuing in an attempt to improve the desperate situation caused by Yemen's civil war. At a remote castle in Sweden, the United Nations has brought together Iranian-backed Houthi rebels and representatives of the internationally recognized government, which is backed by a Saudi-led military coalition. The talks, the first in 2 years, opened with the news that a prisoner swap had been agreed, but major issues remain between the two sides, such as the key Red Sea port of Hodeidah. Our diplomatic correspondent, Caroline Hawley, is at the meeting in Sweden.
The UN itself, UN official told us that just to get the two sides here to Sweden has been an achievement in itself. So expectations were really, really low. Really, the level of anger and distrust between the two sides is so strong that they've actually only sat at opposite sides of a conference room so far. They've not yet talked face to face. But what the UN is hoping is that over the next few days, they will get a chance to mingle with the other side in the dining room. We really are talking at this kind of level at the moment. There's no room service, so they all go down to the dining room, so they'll have a chance to mingle face-to-face there. And then the UN is hoping to get some, what they're calling working groups together to look at some of the issues. But these are very, very, very far from negotiations. The UN is talking about them in terms of consultations. So a baby step, a very, very small step towards solving this terrible crisis.
And is there a sense that anything can come of this, or is it just sort of getting them to the next stage?
That's a good question. In fact, I asked a UN official this evening what would count as success. I really think they would see it as success if they could get the two sides to agree on another round of talks. They just really, really want things to keep on track because the alternative is so serious. Martin Griffiths literally practically pleaded with them to seize this moment for the sake of the Yemeni people. And he said this is an important milestone. It's a critical opportunity that people really, really have to try to do something for the sake of their people.
Caroline Hawley speaking to me from the Yemen peace talks in Sweden. The Eiffel Tower is to close on Saturday in line with French government plans to prepare Paris for further possible violence by anti-government protesters. Authorities in France say 65,000 security personnel are to be deployed across the country on Saturday in anticipation of what they're calling another wave of great violence. This week, the government dropped the planned fuel tax rise that sparked the initial protests, which culminated in several deaths and calls for the resignation of President Macron. Reporting from the French capital, Hugh Schofield.
Briefing French journalists about their fears for Saturday, officials at the Elysée have used language that is, to say the least, alarming. They say that several thousand hardline activists could come to Paris, their aim to smash and to kill. On Facebook, there are numerous calls on Yellow Vest sites for people to turn out once again, and one of the leaders has appeared on television urging protesters to march on the Elysée. Words like insurrection, civil war and putsch are being bandied around, and it's widely expected that revolutionary groups of the far left and far right will once again try to exploit the moment by joining the protest and attacking police. Several museums have said they're shutting on Saturday, and Paris Saint-Germain's home football match has been postponed. The government has sent out more signals that it is prepared to give ground. For example, the planned fuel tax rise, initially suspended, has now been simply abandoned for next year. But around the country, parts of the Yellow Vest movement would seem to be radicalizing. The loudest voices are the ones calling for more protest and more pressure on President Macron.
Hugh Schofield. The nominations have been announced for this year's Golden Globe Film Awards in Hollywood. They're given out by the Foreign Press Association in Los Angeles, and though they're not as big as the Oscars, they do give an early idea of which films are likely to dominate at the Academy Awards. Our arts correspondent Vincent Dowd has been looking at the contenders.
I have seen gods fly. Yeah. But I have never seen anything like this.
Some people claim the Golden Globes don't matter, and it's true the electorate is tiny and unrepresentative. But the fact that, for instance, Black Panther has just been nominated as Best Drama means it's more likely to be on the Oscar shortlist announced 7 weeks from now. Its competitors include the hit new version of A Star is Born and a film which many critics were lukewarm about. The Freddie Mercury biopic Bohemian Rhapsody is also up for Best Drama. The Globes have a separate category for Best Musical or Comedy. A strong nominee there is Vice, starring Christian Bale, unrecognisable as Dick Cheney.
George, I'm the CEO of a large company. The vice presidency is a mostly symbolic job. However, if we came to a understanding.
Vice is the most nominated film overall. Among those disappointed not to be nominated may be Ryan Gosling, who starred in First Man, and Ryan Coogler, who directed Black Panther, a film which, with its almost entirely black cast, surely shows one direction Hollywood is going. Another film with multiple nominations picks up from a huge family hit for Walt Disney 54 years ago.
Now when you're stuck in the mist, sure you can struggle and resist, or you can trip a little like Fantastic with me. Now say you're
Lin-Manuel Miranda is nominated in Mary Poppins Returns, as is Emily Blunt in the title role. Golden Globe nominations are only the start of the awards season. The Hollywood publicity machine will now head full pelt towards the really big event, Oscar night, on February the 24th.
As you trip a little like Fantastic with me.
That report by Vincent Dowd. Still to come in this podcast, residents of Cuba get access to 3G internet on their mobile phones for the first time, and the YouTubers who promoted cheating at university through essay writing services.
Listen, I know there's loads of you out there that don't enjoy doing your assignments. And I don't blame you. Assignments get long, they get stressful, all of that. I say you just head over to edubird.com and make your life easy.
Friday is a big day for Germany's CDU party. At the party's conference, Angela Merkel will stand down as party leader, but not, that is, as the German chancellor. In recent weeks, the three main contenders have rallied the party rank and file up and down the country. Now, as Jenny Hill reports, it's up to the 1,001 delegates in Hamburg to choose.
There's a famous German saying, everything has an end, only the sausage has two. The expression comes to mind now, as the smell of frying meat drifts across this Christmas market and mingles with the aroma of mulled wine. There is an air of finality in Germany now, a sense that as the year begins to draw to a close, so too does the Merkel era.
It's right, she's been too long in the job. It would be better to have a 2-term limit, like in the US.
For me, she was good. I must say I'm sorry to see her leave. It was bad luck for her with the refugee policy, but for me, she was the Chancellor.
Für mich war sie die Kanzlerin.
Hot on the campaign trail, her would-be replacements. Mrs. Merkel's party is about to choose its new leader. Watch closely. That person may yet emerge to be the next German Chancellor.
In Germany, the situation is that, unlike in the UK, the party leader is not automatically then also the prime minister candidate. Those two functions can be separate in this country under our system.
Jan Tekau is an analyst at the German Marshall Fund.
Traditionally, it's always been good for a chancellor to also be the chairperson of his or her own party. And so, heading into a situation where those two jobs are separate again, Merkel stepping down as party chair but staying on as chancellor, builds a friction into the system that is possible, but, not really ideal.
3 candidates have toured the country, holding hustings for the party faithful.
Zukunft gestalten ist unser Motto. Ich möchte Sie gern mitnehmen.
There's Health Minister Jens Spahn, ambitious, energetic, unlikely to win.
Hier stehen wir also jetzt heute Abend beim großen Finale der Regionalkonferenz.
There's the Merkel choice, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, or AKK, a former regional prime minister and the apparent favourite.
Wir haben Landtagswahlen gesehen mit deutlich über 10% Verlust.
But don't rule out Friedrich Merz, the millionaire businessman, once sidelined by Mrs. Merkel, is fighting hard.
There's an elephant in this room, and it's the one person who isn't here. Angela Merkel has led this party for nearly 20 years. She still commands considerable respect. And so the challenge for those who would replace her is this: how to embody change while also representing continuity.
Wir suchen jemanden, der in der Lage ist, die Partei zusammenzuhalten.
We're looking for someone who can keep the party together, who will encourage lively debate, but who can also achieve results, and someone who will, in the medium term, be able to replace Mrs. Merkel as Chancellor.
She leaves a big gap. We might need all 3 candidates to fill it.
Könnte sein.
Many have tried to write Angela Merkel's political obituary and found themselves premature. She remains a towering figure on the world stage, delighting fans in Argentina at the G20 conference. But while she intends to stay Chancellor until 2021, few, including Jan Tekau, think it likely now.
The moment a new chairperson is in the Conservative Party, her power base will erode even further. The authority will diminish. And, depending on who it is, that person will seek the standoff and will seek the decision rather sooner than later.
In a country where leaderships last and change is slow, the political season is beginning to turn.
That report from Jenny Hill. Cuba is one of the least connected countries in the Western Hemisphere, but now the Caribbean island has begun to catch up with the rest of the world. For the first time, residents will have full internet access on their mobile phones. Until now, most Cubans have had to rely on Wi-Fi hotspots dotted throughout Havana and other cities on the island to access the internet. So how's the news being received across Cuba? Will Grant is our Havana correspondent.
People have been waiting for this for a long time, Emilio, so obviously it's been welcomed broadly. I mean, it's not that suddenly everybody is looking down at their phones and not looking at each other in the eyes anymore, because it's going to take quite a while for it to be rolled out, for people to decide whether or not they can afford it. Only about half the island even has mobile phones, but it will make a big difference for students who, haven't been able to access the internet very easily for their studies, for people trying to keep in touch with their families internationally, that kind of thing. And up until now, they've been relying on hotspots, these Wi-Fi parks around the island. So I went down to one of those and heard a range of mainly positive reactions at one here in Old Havana.
It's a great opportunity which is going to resolve problems people have to speak to their families and their loved ones abroad.
I don't see the logic of paying $7 or $20 for the package when you can come here to the park and connect to the Wi-Fi spot.
It'll be good to have more contact with our families. It'll make studying easy. It'll also allow us to look things up on Google, for social networks, for playing games. It'll bring many good things.
And Will, I was in Havana when these were rolled out and people were so excited. A lot of the young people, as you said, many of them had tablets, they had smartphones that they couldn't use as a smartphone that somebody had given them, maybe a relative overseas or something. So now, presumably, people are very excited, as you say. But why has it taken so long?
Well, I think part of the reason it's been held back is purely control. I mean, if the internet was viewed as somehow anti-revolutionary or a tool of the enemy, as it was for a long time, then the government, the revolutionary government, wanted to make sure that it was only eked out very slowly and under their control. So, I think that was part of it. And then beyond that, it was just an infrastructural thing for a while as well. I mean, the island obviously has difficulty sorting out electricity to every corner, so getting 3G everywhere was difficult. Now I think, those things are being overlooked. They've tested, as it were, how people react. By and large, it's Facebook. By and large, it's staying in touch with their families. They're pretty comfortable with that, so they're prepared to sort of give it to everybody while, it should be said, continuing to block certain sites from being accessed.
Will Grant in Havana. Diplomats have expressed concerns about the expulsion of more than a dozen, mainly Western aid agencies from Pakistan, whose work has benefited millions of people. The NGOs include ActionAid, Plan International, and World Vision. The Pakistani government says they have simply failed to complete the necessary paperwork, but there are concerns the move is part of a wider attack on civil society. Sekunder Kermani reports from outside the northern city of Mansehra.
Mohammed Tariq comes to this small spring in his village 4 or 5 times every day to collect water in a bucket for his family. Some of his other neighbours have large blue plastic containers installed outside their homes to collect rainwater, so they don't have to. But the charity ActionAid, which was distributing the containers, is one of a number of NGOs that has been forced to close in the country. It means Mohammed will have to keep getting water from the spring.
If ActionAid could continue working, that would be great. Lots of us have problems with water. Those families who were given water tanks have been really helped by them.
18 international NGOs have been told to stop their operations in Pakistan, but none, it seems, have been given clear reasons as to why they're being forced to leave. They will be allowed to reapply for registration in 6 months' time, but many Western diplomats are furious. There are fears this is part of a wider crackdown on civil society.
We have done excellent work with poor communities in Pakistan and have worked for 28 years.
Adriano Campolina is the chief executive of ActionAid.
The direct impact is that the most vulnerable people in Pakistan will have less access to services and also will lose the ability to benefit from our approach, which is a rights-based approach to organize people to come together, to empower themselves and to claim their rights to a better life.
International NGOs have been viewed with suspicion in Pakistan since allegations Save the Children took part in a fake vaccination campaign to help locate Osama bin Laden. The charity, though, has denied that. Pakistani officials have rejected claims they haven't been transparent enough in ordering the NGOs out. They've said more than half of those applying for registration have been granted permission. The decision to stop the work of major charities like ActionAid, though, will be felt most keenly here, in deprived communities.
Sekunder Kermani reporting from Pakistan. YouTube has deleted thousands of videos in the last few days following a BBC investigation into essay writing services. Companies that promise students original work written to order are being promoted by popular YouTubers as well as on Facebook, Google, and Snapchat. Our education editor, Branwen Jeffries, has been looking at some of the websites.
Listen, I know there's loads of you out there that don't enjoy doing your assignments. And I don't blame you. Assignments get long, they get stressful, all of that. I say you just head over to edubird.com and make your life easy.
I have secret information for you guys, okay? I know an amazing website which helps you solve all your problems at school and university, but
2 of the thousands of YouTube videos deleted by the platform as a result of a BBC trending investigation. Both are sponsored by EduBirdie, a Ukrainian-run essay writing company. Promoting these services is banned by YouTube's guidelines, but since we first exposed the scale of social media advertising of essay writing for cash, EduBirdie has simply become more evasive. And we found 13 more similar companies also pushing their services. It's not just YouTube. We found similar advertising on Snapchat, which told us users and influencers should report them. Facebook has removed some paid adverts we identified. One suggested A-level students could get an essay back in 5 hours. Google hasn't responded about advertising revenue. The reputation of UK university degrees is guaranteed by the Quality Assurance Agency. Its chief executive, Douglas Blackstock, says he's written within the last week to Google, YouTube and Facebook, asking them to starve essay mills of publicity.
We all know the internet is a difficult place to police. But these are the largest corporations with the biggest platforms, with the biggest revenues and the biggest profits. They need to invest some of their time, effort and energy to stopping this from happening, because ultimately it will continue to undermine public trust in those brands if they don't behave responsibly.
Some YouTubers told us their ads were a parody, others that they didn't mean to condone plagiarism. Many accept that as social influencers of their peers, they too have a moral responsibility. Universities fear, unless it's curtailed, the extent of promotion of essay writing by young social media stars is normalising cheating for a generation.
Branwen Jeffries, a robot that has been installed on board the International Space Station, is showing signs of being, well, argumentative. Interacting with a German astronaut, the robot known as Simon, that's Simon but with a C, ignored his master and insisted on playing the same music over and over. More details from Richard Hamilton.
Simon, which stands for Crew Interactive Mobile Companion, was built by Airbus on behalf of the German Space Agency and uses artificial intelligence software to test what they say is human-machine interaction in space. It has a video screen face along with a camera and a digital voice so that it can talk to astronauts. The European Space Agency released a video showing the German astronaut Alexander Gerst giving instructions to Simon. At first, things appeared to go quite smoothly.
I like your favorite hits, too.
But when Gerst orders him to stop playing the music, Simon starts sounding a bit petulant.
Cancel music.
I love music you can dance to. All right, favorite hits incoming.
Cancel music.
What else can I do for you?
Gerst had told Simon to play his favourite music, Man Machine by Kraftwerk, the German pioneers of electronic music. But now he must be regretting that request. The teething problems with a robot on board the space station have echoes of HAL, the fictional computer that features in 2001 A Space Odyssey.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Eventually, Simon is intended to display and explain information that's needed to carry out experiments and repairs. But at this early stage, Simon's job is simply to be Gerst's companion and friend. But, as is often the case, friends can turn out to be a little bit tetchy.
Be nice, please.
I am nice. He's accusing me of not being nice.
Indeed. Richard Hamilton reporting, and I can confirm that Richard is never difficult himself either. And finally, Pete Shelley, the lead singer of the English punk rock band Buzzcocks, has died of a suspected heart attack at the age of 63. The singer formed the group in the 1970s, and they achieved commercial success with hits including this one, Ever Fallen in Love with Someone You Shouldn't Have. If you want to find out other songs to remember Pete Shelley by, or simply to get to know him a bit better, personal favorites of mine are Telephone Operator and Homo Sapien. And that's all from us for now, but there'll be an updated version of the Global News podcast later. And if you want to comment on this podcast or the topics covered in it, you can send us an email. The address is globalpodcast@bbc.co.uk. I'm Emilio San Pedro. Until next time, goodbye.